I have 51 game design tips and ideas for you from 51 games I've played. I know, let's calm down. All of the games I'm about to show you are from WoWie Game Jam, and I hope that this video will be inspiring for everybody who's currently working on a game or looking for a game idea. Let's go. A couple of simple tricks like a vignette and drop shadows for your sprites can make your game look a lot better. Also in this case it's cool that the style stays consistent even in the menu. Healing and repairing your environment can be just as satisfying as tearing it down. Making a game where everything interacts with everything can yield some very interesting results. In this game here, for example, enemies are able to pick up objects and throw them at you. And this hydraulic press is not only able to crush you, but it is also capable of crushing enemies. That makes the entire game system pretty authentic and alive. Purposefully making something hard to control is an interesting premise, and especially in local multiplayer games it can lead to some very funny situations. It feels surprisingly refreshing to walk around in a game without being constrained by invisible walls. Grid-based can be a very good idea for puzzle games because it makes it easy to give the player feedback on what's going on. You can take activities that are already fun, like coding, and turn them into games to make them even more fun. It is a good idea to let players know what they are supposed to do and to be very clear about that. If you have multiple playable characters in your game, it can be very cool to give them different abilities that synergize with each other. In your tutorial, allow players to make mistakes, but make sure they know what to do after they've screwed up. This text box here doesn't explain to me how the mechanic in this room works. It just tells me how to restart, and I'll be able to figure the rest out myself. If you find a cool, fun, interesting mechanic, then make sure the player has to use it quite frequently. Keep exploring the mechanic and maybe even bring it into your boss fight. Simple game ideas can be surprisingly fun when well executed. If the controls feel tight, if the sound effects are rewarding, if the balancing is on point, it just feels nice. Don't be afraid to make an entirely abstract game, because they can often allow you to come up with very unique and interesting game systems. Making enemies fight amongst each other can create a really cool action-packed battlefield. It might be worth it to think about alternative input methods like voice control. If you need a tutorial screen, make one that is very easy to understand and also sets the right mood for the game. Also, the game looks pretty cool as well. Have you ever tried making a game where you control both the player as well as the enemies with the same keys? It's pretty interesting, and I see potential for more games to try this. Take an existing game and turn it into something new and original. Here we have basically Tetris being played in two directions to build a tree. Pixel art games usually look a lot better when all of the pixels always have the same size. And as you can see here, minimalistic characters can look very nice with a good design. Smoothing the movement of some objects out a bit can have a nice feel to it, and having a colored stripe on your walls is a good way to make them more visible. Multi-purpose mechanics are always cool. In this case, shooting is used both for moving around as well as for killing enemies. Use mechanics that synergize with each other. For example, in this game you can shoot downwards to increase your jump height. Make your game sound nice, and don't be afraid to use a bit more abstract sounds. A well-balanced difficulty curve is definitely worth a lot. This game absolutely managed to get me into a flow state, even though it looks so simple. You can use music to communicate the current state of the game. Also, I think being able to bring objects from one level to another is an interesting mechanic, and probably something more developers should play around with. It can often look pretty dope to give your black tones a bit of color. The black in this game, for example, isn't really black, it's more of a dark red. Giving your sprites a simple bouncy squiggle animation is an easy and cost-efficient way to animate them, and it still makes them feel a lot more alive than having no animation at all. Only being able to influence certain objects indirectly can be a very fun challenge. Using a Zig color scheme is one of the best ways to make a Zig looking game. Usually complementary colors like blue, yellow, blue, orange work pretty well together. Being able to edit a level while playing it feels like a pretty damn cool idea. You know, why is the influence of the player always limited to the player character? Let's expand our thinking. Do not make puzzles hard by making them big. A good puzzle is relatively small in my opinion, so you can see and process all of the information you need at once. There's absolutely nothing wrong with making a super simplistic casual game. In fact, it might even be smart, because these games can be enjoyed pretty much by everybody. Create every single sprite out of a coconut. Doesn't matter which kind of game you're making, I think this is some very universally applicable advice. It's so cute. Here we have another example for a great multi-purpose mechanic where shooting, jumping and running is all on the same button, and also it's a pretty nice color scheme. See, nothing fancy here, just nice colors. Two-phase gameplay can be quite fun, where you place a couple of objects in phase 1 and then see how they interact with each other in phase 2. Here we once again have great colors, a constant size for the pixels, multiple characters that complement each other with their abilities. Force the player to stay on the move and not just run in circles. And if you can, make the HP bar part of the enemy design, that's super cool. Make objects interact with each other, that's just interesting. In this game, enemies explode when they collide with each other, they can fight each other. You can even merge two items into a new one. If there are a lot of interesting interactions in your game, that means there's a lot to explore. You throw away a perfectly good hammer into the furnace. Good job. And another contestant for the best color scheme. Here the interesting thing is that you move all of your pieces in a row or column at once. Be smart about the way you implement your tutorial. Almost anything is better than a giant wall of text. Having the text on the side here and letting me try everything out myself feels like a pretty good solution. Simply making the player create something beautiful can make for a satisfying game, even if it's not all that challenging. One interesting movement mechanic can be more than enough to create a super interesting game. Yes, grappling hooks have existed before, but you can just give it your own unique twist to make it your own. Speaking of grappling hooks, they don't even need to be used for movement, you can also use them for puzzle solving. Get creative! Big raising numbers are kind of addicting, as clicker games have proven time and time again, and they give you a sense of progression. Health being stored physically in the center of the map instead of showing it in a boring UI interface. Great idea. This character controls differently depending on how slim or fat he is. All of the interactions are pretty intuitive, you even lose a bit of weight when you jump. I also like that there are two losing conditions, becoming too fat and becoming too slim, both result in you losing. Using a cool background texture can level up the look of your game quite a bit, and if the objects around you interact with each other and not just with you, the game world feels a lot more alive. Don't underestimate text adventures. The beginning of this one captured me quite a bit actually. There somehow is something satisfying about cleaning up and clearing an entire level of dirt. Having to move multiple objects at once with a limited amount of moves is an interesting challenge. It was a 3-day game jam, and one interesting thing I tried to do with my game was to always keep it in a finished state. So here you can see it after day 1, you can already play it all the way through the game. Day 2, still a finished game. I just added a couple of new mechanics like the slide, and I improved the tutorial a bit. And on day 3, I just did polishing and created some custom sound effects. This feels like a pretty stress-free way to create your game, because you never need to be afraid that you won't be able to finish. This YouTube channel is all about growing as a game developer and helping you to grow as a game developer. So I'm very happy that I finally got my hands on a lot of your games. Gives me a bit of an idea where my audience stands in terms of game development. And expect another video where we can address some of the issues I could see in this jam, some of the things we could try to work on together as a team, so we can all keep making better and better games. This is Jonas making games with you. See you in the next one.